This is Cassandra, and I'm doing my video on learning theories. To put it into perspective, I will be teaching biology. First off, I'm going to talk about behaviorism. This is the transfer of knowledge directly through teacher instruction. And the student is a blank slate, receptive of any knowledge the instructor presents. Oftentimes, this involves scripted lessons in which a teacher directly instructs students. There's modification that can be done to encourage student participation and understanding of the context via incentives in the form of verbal encouragement or rewards. B.F. Skinner and Pavlov both used and developed these theories. They used operant conditioning and positive reinforcement to encourage learning. In my classroom, I would establish specific learning objectives and build a sequence of learning activities from simple to complex order in order to build on the student's confidence. I would design my lectures so that content would gradually increase in difficulty and questions would be asked after concepts were presented. I would ask simple questions from the lecture requiring students to use their short-term memory. I would be sure to provide adequate time for the students to respond, and if the answer is incorrect, I would continue with probing questions in order to coax the correct answer out of them, hopefully. I would want to create a positive environment where students aren't afraid to be called upon or answer incorrectly. These questions are important and engaging if the students are retaining information and are on track with their learning. As a side note, I remember in high school biology, my best friend Lindsay, the teacher asks, what is a individual animal, plant, or single-celled life form? And she had the answer, so she raised her hand and she blurted out orgasm, and the answer was organism. But everybody burst out laughing, and the teacher said this happened every year. And maybe since it's such an embarrassing situation, she shouldn't have said that, is just my thought on that. But anyway, next up is the cognitive learning theory. This uses a different approach. Instead of seeing the student as a blank slate, we consider them their own person with their own cognitive skills. We view students as intelligent beings that need to participate in learning rather than being passively lectured at. Their comprehension is the consequence of active thinking. The learning process becomes the student's responsibility. And although it is the student's responsibility as a teacher, I would still be responsible for making the objectives clear. But assembling the knowledge is the student's work at that point. The activities I would use involve my Easily presentation. As you can see, I presented the two types of cellular respiration, aerobic and anaerobic. And also below that, you can see the actual chemical equation. This way, there's a visual of both types of cellular respiration so the students can understand it in their own specific way. The other diagram I would use would be a compare and contrast chart. I made one for cellular respiration and photosynthesis. The students can take their knowledge that they learned in our lecture and compare one process to the other. They can see the similarities and differences. The last theory I discussed will be constructionism or developmental learning theory. This is an active process in which students construct new ideas or concepts based upon their current or past knowledge. This takes cognitive theory to the next level as it requires the students to not only learn the concepts themselves, but to come up with the objectives. Two theories were created to determine the developmental level of our students. Piaget's theory assumed children develop intellectually at 4 different stages based upon their actual age. On the other hand, Vygotsky thought that it wasn't developmental age or maturity, but rather these students were in a zone of proximal development. His theory relies upon the individual's learning capabilities based upon their prior knowledge. In my classroom, I would utilize this theory through the data I had obtained in developmental learning. I already know my students are technically at the correct age for learning this subject, but I would have to determine the zone of proximal development that would require an assessment of the knowledge already learned and retained by the students. I would use a labeling diagram as shown. This way they can take apart the pieces of photosynthesis and cellular respiration as a puzzle and uncover the molecules used in the equation. I think that between these three theories, they all build upon each other in the scientific world. You have to begin with lecturing which would be behaviorism. And once they understood the lecture part, they could continue on to cognitivism, where they create their own charts or graphics. And from there, I think this concept bridges the gap between novice learning and going up to higher levels of thought processes. I could see myself using cognitivism a lot in my biology classrooms, and that would be my favorite. I think visual devices are very useful in learning, especially about cellulars, pieces, about the cell and organisms. Oh my God.